Well, hello and welcome to Transform Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software. And today we're going to be going over custom dashboards. And so let's just jump right into it. I'm also here to take your questions. So if you do have any questions, you can type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. We also have Scott Allen and Sarah Mitchell on the line, and they are here to also help answer questions, dig up documentation, or whatever. But before we get started, Scott or Sarah, could you let me know whether or not you guys can see my screen and whether or not you can hear my voice?
Yes, I can hear you and see your screen.
Excellent. Thanks very much. All right, well, let's get started. So everyone here, I believe, is familiar with the management console in Transform Central. And you're probably familiar with the fact that it has some limitations. It's not, if you're running, say, for example, a field service business or things, there are probably some features in the management console that are missing, things that you would like to see. And one of those for a lot of people is a dashboard. So what we've been doing is we've been building out a separate application that bolts onto the Transform data. Okay, so we're building out something in Alpha Anywhere. To not necessarily replace the management console, but to add to it. Although it may be at the end that you may not have to touch the management console at all. So as I'm building this out, which I expect is going to happen over the next several weeks or month, I want to take you along on that journey to show you how you could build out your own custom interfaces that attach to Alpha Transform. So again, here is the management console. You can see that here on the screen. And I'm going to show you an example of a dashboard here that can also represent our transform data. As you can see, it's a lot more colorful. It's also a lot easier to figure out what's going on. Going back to the previous dashboard, let's say I had a stack of open tickets and I wanted to know which ones, or a stack of tickets or forms that have been submitted. And I wanted to know which ones were open, which ones required approval from a manager, and which ones were closed. I just wanted at a glance because those to me were my key performance indicators, also known as KPIs. Well, let's take a look here. We've actually put those KPIs up here up at the top of our dashboard. We'll see that today there were 35 open tickets still, 7 are pending review, and 78 have been closed. We also have a nice little clock thing. And keep in mind, this is just Photoshop at this point. I'm not, none of this stuff is hooked up. This is just an artist's rendering of it. But I'm going to show you how we can actually build this out for real. So the idea is that this whole system here is going to have not just a dashboard, but also a special interface for dispatching records to people or forms to people in the field, some additional options for review, especially search and find and filter functions for looking at tickets. We're going to have a series of reports that are built behind it, as well as a map interface, which will show you where customers are located, where technicians are located, and other types of location information. There's a settings section. I won't get into that too much. That just has to do with storing API keys and setting up users and things like that. And there's an alerts section so that if a team member wants to send an alert, or if an alert is sent automatically, which we can have done using TPL, that'll show up here in the alert section. An example of an alert, for example, is if someone is filling out an inspection form and they come across something that's just egregiously dangerous and needs to be looked at right away, for example. That might show up here in the alert section. So that's our idea here behind the dashboard. So let's get started. When I'm talking about the notion of open, pending review, and closed, what we're really talking about are status fields in each of the forms. And we're going to go into the permissions tab. This is a tab we don't dive into very often, but we need to do it in this particular case. Now, you probably are familiar with the notion of what an open ticket is. When you create a brand new form in Alpha Transform, it's assigned to open. When the user has finished filling in that form, if they go back just to the done screen and upload it, that form remains open. But you can actually add a couple buttons. Whoops. Let me pop over to the real transformer, show what I'm talking about. You can add a couple buttons, for example, that can not only submit the form, but can also change the status of the form. So for example, when I click the needs review button, I'm going to change the status to approval. And when I click the close button, I'm going to change the status to closed. Easy enough. The deal is, though, as a regular user, I am out of the box, not actually allowed to make those changes. So I had to go here into the Permissions tab and give the user, and in fact, the account administrator, me, permissions to do that. Let me show you how that works. Here on the Permissions tab, you'll see that here's our open, our submitted, and our approved. And there's another one here called closed. So open, submitted, closed, those are the 4 statuses, and you saw them on the other screen. Now here in the middle pane, you'll see I've got an open, I've got a submitted, I have an approval, and I have a closed here as well. And each of these are divided into blocks. So for open tickets, this is what users are allowed to do. This is what account administrators are allowed to do. This is what form designers are allowed to do, management console users, and supervisors. These all line up to the roles that we have back here in Home. Let's pop over to Home. I'll show that to you. I think you're all familiar with Manage User Roles, where you can take a user and you can assign them to one or more of these roles. Well, back here in Permissions, I needed to give the user the ability to mark a ticket as closed or approval, in other words, requesting approval. So I went over here to the Open section, and I said when a form is open, a user, like an end user, should be allowed to do the following. They should be allowed to list, edit, and delete those in the application, but they should also be allowed to change the status. So we call new statuses allowed. What this is really saying is, what am I allowed to change the status to? So the user is allowed to change it to submitted, approval closed, and I did the same for the account administrator as well. And that's all I really needed to do. I did end up giving myself some additional permissions as the account administrator. For example, I want to be able to take one that's pending approval and allow it to be closed. So I had to go down to the approval section. And again, these you'll assign different roles to different people, but this is how you give them the permissions in the role. You do that right here in the Permissions tab. So I hope I haven't thoroughly confused people here, but let me just move back to our designer. And so just know, though, when I click these buttons, I will be allowed to do this. By the way, if you don't have permission and you're on the phone and you click, say, the Needs Review button, you're just going to get a message that says, hey, you don't have permission to do that. So you do kind of know where the problem lies and how to fix it. Okay, so I've got those set up. I have a status field that can have one of these 3 things. It can have open, approval, or closed. What I want to do now, boink, is match that up. Actually, we'll show you this here, to these, open, approval, and closed. So to do that, I started building out this interface in Alpha Anywhere. And let me show you how I put that together. Basically, this is, for those of you familiar with Alpha Anywhere, this is one UX control. Think of it like a form, you might call it, in another development environment. So here I am in Alpha Anywhere, and here's my form. And right now, my dashboard only has my 3 key performance indicators up here, the open, pending review, and closed. And you'll notice they're not styled as nicely as my artist rendition, but when I'm done, they will be. And I'm going to sort of show you how, I won't show you how to do that today, but I'm going to show you where you go to make the HTML changes so that you can make this pixel perfect, make it look exactly the way you want. And that's something that the Viewbox control works really well at as a component here in the UX. So let's pop back over here to the designer, and I'm going to show you how I put this together. So here I am in Alpha Anywhere, and I've created what's called a panel layout. That lets me put together these components called panel navigators and panel cards, which are used to assemble your application, sort of a building block type of approach. So my first one, the panel layout, which starts here and encompasses everything, you could think of that as the whole window. So here it is right here. This is the whole window, and this is all placed in what I've called a panel layout. Within the panel layout, I have a panel card, and the panel card is actually pretty short. It's only 40 pixels high, and this is it up here, and I'm using it to build the header. It's that blue line right there. And you'll see that I've given that panel body style a background color here, 4E, C3, E7. That corresponds to the blue color. And I've included a text object, but I haven't actually put anything in there. But if I had included something, that's where it would appear up here. So you might put in text, you might put in a company logo, you might add additional controls and stuff up here. Right now, I'm just leaving it blank. Next up in our controls, so let me just close that down so it's not in the way, is our body. And the body here is another panel layout, and that encompasses this area here. That includes the navigation section and this dashboard. And in fact, the dashboard, so the navigation section is a separate panel card, and the dashboard is a separate panel card. So here is my navigation panel card right here. Here it is, oops, navigation. And in it, I've added a button. I'll get to why I did that in a moment. And here is the main navigation area here in this area. So now to display these three key performance indicators, we need to build a view box. And this is it right here, the view box control. Let me just open that up because that's how everything works here. When I first start building out, oops, let me exit that save. Yep. When I start building out view box controls, given by what a view box control does, first of all, let me explain that, is it takes some data in JSON format, and it takes a template, which is an HTML format with CSS, and it merges them together to create an output. So in the example here, if I close this, exit without saving, yes, and I go into working preview, and I show you the output that I have created a view box control that draws these three boxes and then takes the data and uses them to populate these boxes here. Let me show you how I did that. So here we are in the Viewbox Builder. In the Viewbox Builder, there are a couple different data types that you can go with. You can choose either, actually several. You could choose custom, which I've done, which meant that I have a script that runs to pull the data down from TransForm. But another thing that's really handy to work with is static JSON. When I first build a Viewbox Builder, I usually start with static JSON, which I've done here, and I just paste it in. Let me just show you the JSON that I'm working with. Really simple here. JSON, as you may know, is just a collection of name value pairs. So here's box 1. It's called, I've given it a value of 35. Box 2, I've given a value of 7. And box 3, I've given a value of 78. So that's what should apply. So this is the data that will get merged into our Viewbox. Now, let me go ahead and cancel that. Let me show you the layout of the Viewbox. That's the data. Here's the layout. The Viewbox layout is just plain old regular HTML. You can use JavaScript with it. You can use CSS. You can use, really, the sky's the limit. And this is really nice because lots of people, well, not lots of people, but there are people out there who are really good at HTML. And a lot of programmers are not super at HTML, even though they're good at being programmers. So as it turns out, I have Scott Allen on the line with us today. And at the end of this call, I'm actually going to take this code. I'm going to send it over to Scott Allen, and I'm going to say, listen, can you make what I have in my preview look like the artist's rendition? And then hopefully he'll send me back working code that will do that. But let me just go through the code real quick. All I've done to build that interface was I created a table. Let me show this to you. Oh, I can't show it to you in working preview, can I? Let me see if I have a screenshot of that. Well, I'll just do it this way. Hang on a moment. Close. Exit. Yes. I'm going to move this over here. And we'll go back in here. All right, cool. Let me move this control panel out of the way. Okay, so in the Viewbox layout, I built a table. So this whole area here is a table. And I've divided it up into cells. That's a cell, that's a cell, and that's a cell. And then within each cell, I've placed a field. And I can get those right here by just clicking Insert Field, and it lets me choose my fields. So I've called this one box 1, which is the next one I called box 2 and box 3. So this one paints, using this background color, a blue box with a value of box 1. This one paints a purple box with the value of the field in box 2. And this one paints a green box with the value of the field in number 3. So if I rendered that with the static data, I would get something that looked pretty much like this. I didn't put the icons in yet, but let me just kind of show you what that looks like. So I'm going to close. Actually, this time I am going to save. Exit without saving. Oops, actually, I'm not going to save. I'm going to go into working preview, and that's what it looks like. But notice it didn't take the data. My static data had like 35, 7, and 78. It didn't take that data because I left it set to, I left the source set to Xbasic, and let me get into that right now. Instead of using static, so I use static JSON when I build it out and I test it and I try to get the look right. But in real life, when I'm running my dashboard, of course, I want to pull the data right from TransForm. So to do that, I've built a function that gives me my data back. And that function I called get KPIs. So the get KPIs takes the JSON data, feeds it to the Viewbox builder, it merges it with the template, and that's the output. So now the next question probably is, okay, that's great, but how do I build that Xbasic function? And I'm going to get into that right now. Exit without saving. So my Xbasic function is as follows. This is my get KPI function. And here are a couple notes up at the top. And this is kind of what the output should look like at the end. It should say there are name value pairs that I had showed you in the previous example. Now these are commented out, but if I had left these in, it would hard code it to that, and that's what I would get back. So instead, what I've done is I have created a script here that fetches all of my data. I have my API key. I am going to be deleting it after this, so don't try scooping it. And I have this code here pulls down the data from TransForm. Now, I'm not like the world's best Xbasic coder, so I used a built-in tool to actually write this code for me. So let me just minimize this, and I'm going to show you what that tool looks like. So here I'm at the Web Projects control panel, and I'm up at the Tools menu. And I'm going to choose the Open TransForm API Explorer. So let me go ahead and click that. And the API Explorer allows you to enter in your API key, which I've done before, earlier. And for those of you who aren't familiar, you get your API key right in TransForm Central. So that's here at the Home tab. You'll go down to Get API Key. You choose the permissions. We really just needed a read-only key, so I could have just chosen that. You click the button, it'll give you the key, you can copy it, and then you can paste it back into Alpha Anywhere. So now, when I'm in the Explorer, it shows you all the different methods that TransForm's API allows you to access. And the one in particular that I want is called Get Form Instances Array for Form ID. Kind of a mouthful, I know. And the form ID in this case, I think, let me just type it in, field service, I believe is the name of it. And if I click test, if I've done this right, I'm going to get back, so error equals false, I'm going to get back all of the forms of the field service type that I filled in. And here they all are. Let's look at that data a little bit more closely. As I dig down through this data, you're going to see some of the results are going to have like the person, that was me who filled it out, when it was created, when it was completed. But one of the key fields that we're really interested in here is down here is the status field. Actually, I think that might be higher up. Status, yeah, here's an example of a status field. This one is marked as closed. And in the next one, this one is marked as open. And in the next one, also marked as open. So here's all the data. It comes back with the different statuses, open and closed. So what my script does is it actually pulls all this data down, and then it iterates through the data, and it keeps tally of which ones are open, which ones are closed, and which one are marked as approval, also what we call pending approval. So I'm going to close that, and let me show you sort of a script that I was messing around with before I built this function. I'm going to open that up. And, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you something really very relevant. I forgot a totally key step here. Let me go back. Open TransForm API Explorer, field services test. And there is, oops, I don't have, do I not have a field? Maybe it's just called field service. There it is, yeah. Okay, now that I know that this test worked, I don't want to write the Xbasic behind it myself, so I can just click on this Xbasic tab here, and I can copy the code to the clipboard because it's done all the code writing here for me. Just created this little stub for me that I can use. So that's so after you've figured out the data that you want to get back, you're going to do that here. So the next thing I did is I went into, I'm going to close that down. I went in and I built just a regular script using the script editor. And I added a debug line to the very top of it. And the reason I did that is I wanted to go through and take a look very carefully at the data that I was getting back so that I knew how to reference it properly in my script. So I'm going to run this script right now in debug mode, and I'm going to step you through how it works. Okay. So the debugger actually started after I had furnished my API key and after I had made a call to TransForm. This is the function that makes a call to TransForm to get the data back. So I'm going to step you right here through the code. And it's right now, it's set a, let me clear out these guys here. Oops. Close, 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 close. Okay. So here's the, I've set the debugger on, and here we have just determined that there's no error. And here I'm just setting a couple of variables. Let me just step through these. These are the counters for each of the boxes. And now here I'm using the JSON parse command. So what I've done is I've taken the result set that I got back from the API and I've parsed it into this pointer variable called P. If I type P here and I just want to show you what's in it, there's all the stuff that's in it. Okay. And if I say P dot, okay, so that's that. So now as I scroll through here, I'm going to step to the next line. I should have something called, I should have set a variable called status now at this point. Oops. Status. And you'll see that the status for that particular record was marked closed. Now let me just keep trace stepping through here, and we're going to watch that that's going to change. So now as it's going back through for the next time, it's checking to see, and the status on that one is also closed. And now this time you'll see, for this one it's open. And as I go through, it just keeps going through. And if it's open, it adds one to box one. If it's set to approval, let me see if I can find one set to approval. Closed. Where's approval? I know I've got at least one. There's an approval one. And so each one, it catches it here in this if statement and increments a counter. So at the very end of this, if I keep stepping through it, you'll see my box one variable, box 2 variable, and box 3 variable will increment as I go. So I step, step, step. And we've got, okay, and now I finally iterated through, and you'll see box 1, there were 3 of them that were marked open. Box 2, there were 2 of them marked approved, and box 3, there were 4 of them marked closed. And then here I built out the return string that I want to hand back to the Viewbox control. That's called KPI JSON. And this is what's headed back. Here's the name value pairs like we had before, only this time it's pulling it using real data that it iterated through. Box 3, box 2, box number 4. Cool. So when I return that back to my function, it will display the right stuff on the screen. So let me go ahead and close the debugger, and I'm going to close this Xbasic script, and we're going to jump right back into our UX. So that was a script. I built that script separately, but then when I was done with it and I was happy with it, I built it, I basically just pasted it in to my UX control under UX functions for the getKPI function. So the getKPI function, that's the box 1, box 2 stuff that we're doing here, the parsing stuff. It's basically the exact same script I just showed you. And that's the function that's called, and that's the function that populates the Viewbox control. So let's see it live. Let's go over to working preview. And there it is. Now, these all load, and so as soon as I opened this up, it made a call back to TransForm. It figured out how many were open, how many needed review, and how many needed closing, and that all got displayed here on this screen. Now, if I wanted to refresh this, you could do this in a couple of different ways. I think a typical way would be to put some sort of timer on this UX, and every minute or so, have it go and run this refresh script again. What I've done, though, just to make it easy, is I've just placed a button. And I placed it with a little animation. I don't know if you'll see the animation over GoToWebinar, but let's take a look. So I click it and it should fade out. and then it fades back in. It's pretty subtle, but I'll do that again. Fade out, fade in. And in each time, it actually made a callback and ran that script and figured that out. But let me show you that I'm not cheating. Let's actually put in a real record using the TransForm mobile application, and let's see if this thing actually updates in real time. So to do that, let me open up my phone. And I'm going to connect and do some screen sharing here. Okay, so I should be here somewhere. Let's pop over to this. Here I am. Yep, great. So let me open up TransForm. Blah, blah, blah. TransForm. Where are we? Here we go. TransForm. And I'm going to add a new form. And it's the field service form that I'm going to add. And this is a really simple form. It just had these two fields and those two buttons, as I showed you before. So the inspector name is Dave. And let's just say that in this time I was able to fix the problem. Fixed problem. If only it were that easy, right? And now I'm going to close it. So I'm going to tap on the close button, tap, and I'm going to upload it to the server. So now I've created a new form, I've uploaded it to the server. Now let's head back into Alpha Anywhere to our dashboard. And since I marked it as closed, that number 4, when I refresh it, if I've done it right, should update to a number 5, which it's done right now, as you can see. Now, if I had left, if I had created a new one and left it open, it would have it would have incremented open. And if I had done one and marked it pending review or approval, that's the one that would have shown up there. So that is the starting point, really. That's kind of what I wanted to show you today for building out dashboard solutions using Alpha Anywhere. Now, I've spent a long time explaining this in real life. Once you're good at Alpha Anywhere, you can be putting these dashboards together in a matter of like an hour or 2 hours or something like that, depending on how complicated they are. But I wanted to take that through with you in case that's something that you would like to do with your own TransForm applications. So do we have any questions? Or have I just confused everyone thoroughly? I know that happens sometimes too. If there aren't, but you do have questions later, go ahead and send them to tfservice, like TransForm service, at alphasoftware.com. Wonderful. Well, that looks like it. So, hey, thank you everyone for joining me today. I hope you found this useful, and I hope you join me. We will not be meeting next week. We're actually taking the week off for the July, the Independence Day holiday week. But Alpha is open, but we will not be doing TransForm Tuesday that Tuesday. But I'll be back the following week, and hopefully I'll be showing you some more cool tricks that you could do to build out this dashboard into a full-fledged solution. So thanks for joining me. Hope to see you in 2 weeks. Take care and goodbye.